Hey, how's y'all doing, everybody? Again, this is your host, Mr. Blows Your Minds, and welcome to the most hated show in the black corner of YouTube. Been in the business since 2012, and foremost, we want to say what's good to my fam, my subscribers, my day ones. What's good, everybody? Thank each and every one of you for clicking on the video. Passerbys, if you happen to pass by through to the title or the thumbnail itself, welcome to the most hated show in the black corner of YouTube. We always got a grand opening over here. Go down the aisle, happen to see something to make you feel some kind of way. Remember, the motto of my show is, the truth don't need no partner. Well, we are closing in more and more to the date of November 7th. Where the country, it is said, but it's not how the rules of the game go, but election will take place, and looks like for we as BADOS, which is Black American Descendant of Slaves, been campaigning from both sides. One seemed to be hidden in the basement and only come out periodically. But people have been laying out what they're going to do for those who they believe are constituents that are going to help them to win. But when it comes to Black Americans descendant of slaves, everybody's mum is the word. No one has nothing or doesn't want to even stir up the pot. Just suggesting that we need to get somebody out because of, as our history has shown, we can't tell any difference. There may be severities as to how certain people are more open with it than those who are clandestine and doing just as much damage, as not more. So today's video or today's show is going to be based on the fact about why the United States owe Black Americans reparations. Let me say that again. Today's show is going to be based on why the United States owes Black Americans reparations. A lot of people will be just upset, and just downright angered of the term of that word. Many of you, at least the way you act, a lot of times everybody acting dumbfounded as they clueless as to they don't know why, and think that this is just something to be said to entice you to be angry. We would assume that when we all go to school or have gone to school, that when they went into the classroom and the curriculum of teaching about history went across the country equally, the same thing is being taught. But we as Black American descendants of slaves, we realize that the history that we were taught in the schools told us from the perspective of what you want us to understand. So it takes for the inquisitive mind to get older, to go through certain things, to figure out that, you know what? There's more to the story than has been told. The way the psychological subliminal seduction of my mind has programmed me is to believe that the only thing that I could aspire from just being a slave is anything that I acquire now as I develop as an adult. And so those who have that kind of mind to try to get a deeper insight as to what done gone on, we have found certain things. I think it's part of the evolving as a people who come through this history, that we must also inculcate those who do not know. And so reparations is a hot topic. It is a topic that it divides nations and peoples based on their interpretations, their lack there of knowledge, their ignorance, their willingness to just say, I don't care. But I think we as BADOS, it's not our job in particular to make sure that everybody knows, but I think it's our job to let it be heard what really is the core understanding of why we're saying what we're doing and why we advocate for it. And those who truly understand try to use the fact of your ignorance to hide behind when the truth is right in your face if you're seeking for it. So many will say, why do black people keep talking about this word? Haven't you got over it? Haven't you achieved or have access to what the country states that everybody's entitled to if you work hard and pull yourself by your bootstrap? Didn't I from somewhere else come and do the same thing? You might have came from somewhere else, but don't you have a history of where you come from, or have you cutting that out, lobotomize it from your mind, and now you've taken on this new persona? So you come into a new house with already existing, let's say, residents, and you, I guess, willfully want to ignore what took place prior to, only for the benefit of oneself. So if that should happen to be the shoes that fit you, you need to listen to this. So how did this all begin in this country? How did it all begin for black people in this country to the fight that we are in the time of 2020? But you're still looking for, some would say equality. Some say just to repair for the damage. Many others have their other ways of saying these things. So let's see, what was the core fight for us, and that took us from a point that we will cover to where we are today. Listen to this as I read this to you and be right back. Check this out. Dred Scott versus Sanford. The question before us is whether the class of persons described in the plea and abatement composed of a portion of this people and are constituent members of this sovereignty. We think they are not, that they are not included and were not intended to be included under the word citizens in the Constitution, and can therefore claim none of the rights and privileges which that instrument provides for and secures to citizens of the United States. On the contrary, they were at the time considered as a subordinate and inferior class of beings who had been subjugated by the dominant race, and whether emancipated or not, yet remained subject to their authority, and had no rights or privileges but such as those who held the power and the government might choose to grant them. The language of the Declaration of Independence is equally conclusive. It begins by declaring that when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal stations to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitled them, decent respect for the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impels them to the separation. It then proceeds to say, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among them is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. General words above quoted would seem to embrace the whole human family. If they were using a similar instrument at this day would be so understood, but it is too clear for dispute that the enslaved African race were not intended to be included, and formed no part of the people who framed and adopted this declaration. For if the language, as understood in that day, would embrace them, the conduct of the distinguished men who framed the Declaration of Independence would have been utterly and flagrantly inconsistent with the principles they asserted. And instead of sympathy of mankind to which they so competently appeal, they would have deserved and received universal rebuke, reparation. Upon these considerations, it is the opinion of the court that the act of Congress which prohibited a citizen from holding and owning property of this kind in the territory of the United States, north of the line therein mentioned, is not warranted by the Constitution, and is therefore void, and that neither Dred Scott himself nor any of his family were made free by being carried into the territories, even if they had been carried there by their owner with the intention of becoming a permanent resident. Upon the whole, therefore, it is the judgment of this court that it appears by the record before us that the plaintiff is in error, is not a citizen of Missouri in the sense in which that word is used in the Constitution. All right, we are black, right? So this was the decision in 1857 by Chief Justice Taney, right? We just lost Ginsburg, right? And then there was the conversation that was talked about with Donald Trump talking about how this country has lost its patriotism, and that it has a lot to do with the Marxism teaching about America being this great place of racism and hatred, when they say that it's not the truth, and that he wants to instill 1776 as the new patriotic teaching for his and their offsprings to look at America for the way they interpret it or they see it. But they always have said that there are three sides to the truth. There's your side, there's the other side, and then there is the truth. So as I read to you about this Dred Scott versus the Sanford, this was the Chief Justice Taney's opinion, and this was in this plea abatement. And the question came as to, were we as BADOS members of this sovereignty that they're talking about? He emphatically said they are not. Now this again is the Supreme Court, which is the highest court in the land, who said this. And that he said the origin, the writing, the spirit, the time of all this manifesting itself, we were not included. We were not intended to be included when they used the term of the word citizen, specifically in the Constitution. So they said that therefore there could be no claim of rights and privileges that the instrument considered as a subordinate and inferior class of beings. Now, black people in this country, our history, have we been deemed a second class? Is that a figment of the imagination? Or is that will be your denial as to the truth? And so at this time, they say, at the time of all this being writing, what was our position? So you had us as subordinate and inferior class of beings who were subjugated, as y'all say, to the dominant race. And Judge Taney's said it didn't matter whether to be emancipated or not. This position would never change. Now, these are his words and his opinion, but are there a majority of the people who still to this day hold on to this as still the crux and core of what was said? Would say again, they love to say rule of law, But here's the highest court in the land who has stated this. Yes, you will come back later on and say this is the worst decision that was ever done. But the effects, the cause and the effects of what these words had said that some people take literally and will live and embody and make sure that it will for fruition, we became those people who had to endure that. Now, those of you who come from other places who don't understand this is your time to hear. Okay? And so, again, as Tanny talked about, emancipated or not, that you would remain, that we would remain subject to their authority. No rights or privileges, but only those that the power of the government might choose to grant us. Let me say that again. Judge Taney's words said whether we was emancipated or not, that we would remain subjects to the authorities with no right or privilege except for those that the power of the government might choose to grant us. Is that still true to this day? And so when they talk about the language of the Declaration of Independence, and it's how it's equally to the same thing the Constitution was saying. And that even when you think about the course of human and the events that may take place, it may come a time that it's necessary for the dominant people, right, to have to choose whether to be separate or at equal stations, which the law of nature and nature's God entitled them. But who are the ones that are going to make them to adhere to that? God is the after effect. God is working in the spirit of things that are manifesting and happening to this day. But that who is, as said, of the government, judicial, executive branch, who runs that? So we love to say we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. But in the beginning, in the foundation, were we equal? They will say about endowed by their creator. Well, did you create us? Or are you talking about this creation that you made during the subjugation of being under the dominant, as you say, superior race? So did you make yourself to become our God? And that there's certain inalienable rights. When they talk about life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, secure these rights. Government are instituted deserving the just power from the consent of government. So we only are as good as the laws that are written that you give us privilege in and have always been in, right? So here it is. They talk about the history going back to when they really created this and talking about how they foresaw the whole human family. I don't know who they say is human and who's not human. We know what science says, but their interpretation of what they say is right. And that what they wrote, that instrument, they were talking about them as being humans and you being subhuman or not. And that the fact that being an enslaved African race was never to be intended to be included in whatever form of shape that they thought and saw as freedom. And even the people who formed, constructed, wrote, framed, and adopted this declaration, the language that they wrote then is the language that has stood to the test of time. And it has not been inconsistent except for a few have come along trying to challenge it. But what we see today, is it self-evident? That the Supreme Court opinion that the act of Congress, which they say had prohibited citizens from holding and owning property, when they talk about going back to the origin, If you could put that in Congress, what was any difference about those who were subjugated, as they say, under to the dominant race? So there was a contradiction between what Congress had said in certain aspects, and then here they saying here, but then they try to say, oh no, that was non-void. So their determination became Dred Scott himself and nor his families were made free from being carried into territories. But the judgment is that they determined that the Constitution did not talk about them. And so here we were, black people, going through what we've gone through. When you talk about 1619 in that project, we're just talking about history in itself. 401 years. And yet, in 2020, we still having debates. We understand that the cost is unfathomable. The damage is actually unfathomable too. But a lot of people want to look and say they're righteous and good in heart, but not when it comes to deeds. We want to give you sweet tongue, a flowery tongue. But again, as like in the Mac in the movie, Pretty Tony said, I keep on good, clean and all that, but no dough. Right? So that leads us to today. So the crux of the beginning starts with that being stated, and had that been subliminally kept through the whole ordeal since we've been here? That's a question only you can answer. Only you can be honest about it. Right? So it leads us to today, 2020. We're going to go back. But that's the beginning. That's where the core fight has always been with black Americans in this country, is the simple fact that you have never wanted to consider black Americans, whether about equal is not another thing, but to try to classify them to be lower than you. When you talk about Creator has endowed all alienable rights, but you say that the rights can only be given unless you give, which means you have self-determined yourself as God. And others who kneel to you as God. So let's look at, since we're talking about 2020 in the campaign, I've seen this conversation here. I want y'all to hear this. And we'll come back. Check this out.
We're at 16.9, almost 17% black unemployment. Latino unemployment is at 17.6. Last statistics of the Labor Department. Let's do a hypothetical and say that you are elected, you get people of color's unemployment down to single digits. Most people are working, they're happy. Bob Johnson recently suggested that the African American community should see $14 trillion in reparations to try to eliminate the wealth gap, because if you are employed as a person of color, you are still so far behind in being wealthy in this country. The wealth of a white family is 7 times that of a black family.
That's exactly right.
I know you've said before that you want to see studies, that you weren't necessarily ready to say you were for reparations, but you'd be willing to at least look at studies. There are a lot of people who suggested that these studies have been going on for a mighty long time, and why not say now whether you would be for reparations or not?
I know it has to be done now, and you know it too. Let's not wait. Let's do the study and decide whether there should be direct cash payment. But in the meantime, you know it has to be done. We know now. For example, if in fact the homes of African Americans that are the same housing that white Americans have were valued at the same rate, there'd be $154 billion more equity in black homes. That's how most white people and everyone else builds equity, builds cash, builds access to pass things on. We have to change that. We have to change the way in which we deal with access to housing. We have to change the way in which we allow people to be able to get in and purchase housing in the first instance. We have to. Then these are things we can do, and we can do it. And by the way, right now, we can change the education system overnight. I've been proposing for a long time now. We should have Title I schools that have very low tax bases in their communities. We should go from $15 billion a year to 45, which we can do overnight. Increase the salaries of teachers to $60,000 a year. They're 23% paid less than everybody else graduating from school. Get them in a position where every single child in that community is able to, and they're not just African Americans, is able to go to school, not go to daycare, school. 3, 4, and 5 years old in school. Every study of the last 8 years of all the great universities shows that will increase by over 55% their ability to go all the way through all 12 years. We should be finding
and we should
free
note
access.
We should note we can find that on Biden.com, but I'm not sure what your answer is to the reparations question.
If in fact there are ways in which to get direct payments for reparations, I want to see it. But why are we waiting around for the study? We can deal with it.
Well, they're not mutually exclusive. You don't have to wait around for the study.
Exclusive.
That's my point.
No, but they look. They're not mutually exclusive. But I can't believe that whatever it is, the African American community would not support what I'm talking about. In addition to,
I don't think we have to. Let me ask you this then. Let me ask you this so we can move on because we've got to get some phone calls in as well. But let me ask you this then. If in fact a calculation comes to you that you are satisfied with, would you then say, I'm for reparations?
The answer is it would depend on what it was and will it include Native Americans as well.
All right, we black, right? So that was the interview with Ed Gordon and presidential candidate 2020, Joe Biden. And so you heard the conversation, you heard the things that were spoken about. Then at the end, you heard that, well, it would be accepted as long as you're taking it as a package deal, right? Got to be inclusive with somebody else. Why, when it comes to dealing with Black Americans descended of slave, there has to be a package deal? I think by itself, I don't think based on the severity of what done took place, I don't think you want to add more to the bill, right? Imagine again, analogy would be we out to eat and you only have a certain amount of money, but people are trying to add other people to come in and sit at the table because you're the one that's going to flip the bill, and they're adding more people to the bill. Aren't you going to say, wait a minute, I only got so much money, so I don't think I need to be adding more people? But somehow, I guess adding certain people might be a subliminal way to add people who really not supposed to be a part of that. But why is it that dealing with Black Americans directly, knowing their history, why we're looking for somebody else to add into it, right? So when we look at what the country has been going through, especially when we're talking about since May 25th of 2020 with the George Floyd, meaning being the catalyst, was the fire that lit the wick to why people believe there's an urgency, and I don't know whether it's really a debate, but the compensating of we as BADOS, ADOS, B1, FBA, many names that people call them, but they all are of the same cut cloth ethnicity of people who come as the descendants of those of slavery. And so at one particular time, they had offered that they talked about where the lawmakers went and had voted. And what they did is they voted on to this bill which they said they were going to study reparations. Right? Let me say that again. The Democratic lawmakers had got together and they voted this summer to study reparations. And you have seen several states and some cities, they had started to propose and plan to examine the issue as well, right? And so a lot of people believe that reparations is a very complex and a thorny situation, right? Or a subject. I don't say situation because it already took place. And so many people have been agitated about hearing the news about, Black Americans being indignant and trying to be self-propelling themselves to try to stand on something that many believe you don't have the right to ask for that. Many have said, well, none of you living today were in slavery. Well, let's look at this, right? So many people will sit there and say, well, again, as I said, well, none of you were in slavery. Okay. Let's say that, hypothetically speaking, let me take the hypothetical road here. Hypothetically, slavery and what happened afterwards is two of the whole. There's two parts to the whole. Because the part after, if you want to say slavery, it still continues to this day. Actually, there was never no break. It's kind of like saying that how they built, what is that, what was that, what they built over the Aswan River? How they built that Aswan River to make the disconnect between Africa and calling it now the Middle East, right? So, is that what that was about? Trying to make a sever so that you didn't have to deal with it in its entirety? So, if that be the case, if we cut off slavery, let me say this, ancestors, I am nowhere trying to disconnect you from anything that I'm talking about. This is a hypothetical conversation that who may be hearing me. So let's just say if I was to hypothetically cut off the slavery part. Now you have everything forward from, as we're going to talk about, what was this study of this HR 40 and what was it about? Because when we look at this for what it is, obviously you're going to see what it was and what we're talking about. And then those who say, well, you're not part of slavery, well, what about this? So let me go ahead and give you some insight as to what I'm talking about. Now, the reparations, as they want to talk about, will start from the date after the end of the Civil War. Let me say that again. So let's take the hypothetical cutout, if let's say for those who like to use that as a talking point that none of you living today were in slavery. Well, let's say from end of the Civil War, right? From the time of the so-called 40 acres and the mule. So what if we was to start there? Would that be sufficient enough? Because a lot of people, we hear the term 40 acres and the mule, but, that was a special field order called number 15. And it was a wartime order that was proclaimed by a U.S. general. And this was during the American Civil War. Now, according to what this 40 acres and the mule was talking about, was the simple fact that they were going to allot land. Now, some would say some of the family. I don't know how you're going to have some when you're talking about a whole institution of people who are a part of this. So I don't know how you could say some. I think they write some in the way because they're talking about, well, we were offering to some of them. No, it was going to be all of them. Unless you want to talk about those who did not secede from the Union. Right? Because when you really boil down and look at this, this is really about those who succeeded from the Union and then those ones who were still intact. So actually all this only applied to those who were part of that. But that's another topic for another time. And so in this, they were talking about giving plots of land, and they were claiming there was probably no more than about 40 acres, right? And somehow they ended up talking about, well, they were going to lend us mules for the agrarian reform efforts, right? But our ancestors had believed, being told directly, now you know what they say, the Indians say, as Joe Biden talking about the Indians, that somebody speaking with a forked tongue, right? His words or their words are never as straight as they say. So you have to learn to be able to understand the fact that what one may say directly is maybe something in the fine print of the words that they're speaking. So what happens here is that we supposedly had these rights to own these lands. The lands that we are going to be so-called receiving, these lands came from the lands that we had already left. Let me say that again. For those of you who are not familiar with the history or have never heard of the history, do you know that the 40 acres and the mule that they're talking about, a rented mule, right? A lent mule. But the 40 acres that they were going to give us was going to actually put us back into the places which we had fled from, which I'm going to give you and tell you that as I talk about this. Okay? And so some of our ancestors took advantage of this order. Now just imagine that. Now I'm going to say this because not in total agreement to what he said, but think about what he said. Now is it factual or not? It's only your interpretation. Remember when Kanye West said that Harriet Tubman put you back in slavery? Think about that. Those who supposedly say freedom in the North, got to those places, and then after the Civil War, where did you go? Where were these 40 acres in the mule lands at? So the lands that they're talking about were South Carolina, Georgia, and the Florida coast. But see, there's something also that happens that I will talk about at another time that many people do not equate to what took place. Okay? So keep that in mind about that 40 acres and the mule, right? That's what happened. But let me give you some information that you may not have known as well. Did you know that there was a such thing as called the Homestead Act? Right? The Homestead Act. And this was where it was going to give, I think it was about 160 million acres of public land. What they said is about 10% of the total land of the United States to give to about 1.6 million homesteaders. And these lands are supposed to be west of the Mississippi River, right? And this here, of this giving of this homestead, is at when? In 1862. What's happening in 1862? Am my people, are they supposedly emancipated? And we'll talk about that emancipation as I get to it. Was Black Americans emancipated to enjoy the benefit of the so-called Homestead Act? Now, the stipulation that they talk about to get this Homestead Act was that you didn't have to take arms against the federal government of the United States. That's how you could apply. So that pretty much means that those that were coming from the South and the Confederate could not apply for these Homestead Acts, correct? Okay? They were talking about women could get it. They were talking about immigrants. I don't know, newly white folks, I guess, coming there. And they could apply for citizenship that were eligible. Okay? Now that's in 1862. That there, what would you say, who were the ones to be able to get this? If you was a betting man, would you say that that was primarily white folks in 1862 that were able to receive the Homestead Act? If you was a betting man, I bet you bet your money on that, right? Now, they may say immigrants, but that just means it could be people coming from Europe coming into the United States. You can also say Jewish people were coming. A lot of people that don't actually know about that as well. So what ended up happening is in 1866, they came back in based on the simple fact of now after the Civil War, which I'm going to talk about again, but I want you to keep this in mind, that in 1866, explicitly, it only included Black Americans descended of slaves. Let me say that again. Original one was in 1862. Okay, black folks are not what? Emancipated. Okay, or what your understanding of what emancipated is, right? So 1866 come, and then they have explicitly included Black Americans. But what's happening? Because remember that the criteria is that you never took up arms against the federal government. You got to fill out an application. So you know what happened, right? You know what happened. You know how it's something that we might try to be obtained, and then we're trying to apply for it. Now it depends on who's the person who's receiving it. It might be who the people in charge of the institution or the operation could have bias. So guess what probably happened? A lot of our people did not obtain it. Because they also want to say that we didn't have the money to file the fees. But I'm going to show you that is a lie. They said a lot of people didn't have the money to file for the fees. So it was a lot of bureaucratic red tape to deny you to get. And those who did get, well, there's going to be a history as I go on later about that, right? Okay? So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. And so that was that. And so, as I said, and I will talk about it again, because there's a history and about that second Freedman Bureau bill. And that is where a lot of people, this is why you see all the statues that was in the South, and that you've seen how they try to use the Black Lives Matter / Antifa or everybody else in there using the black face and the people in position doing certain things. But a lot of people don't even understand. Well, how if they talk about the Civil War? How was it that these statues were still around if they lost the war? It's because they didn't tell you everything about what took place. And they probably don't teach that, right? Ain't gonna be no, they don't teach it. We know they don't teach it. We'll be right back. Take this break. All right, we black, right? So yeah, they're not going to teach that history. Is because then it makes your inquisitive mind to go and dig deeper to try to say, hey, what really is this about, right? So now remember again, the beginning of what was said as Judge Taney in his decision. We go through the Civil War, right? We got 40 acres in the mule that's been promised to us. And then we're going through what they call the Reconstruction era. Okay? Now the Reconstruction era is between 1863 to 1877. Supposedly, as they tell us, is making our ancestors citizens. Guaranteed by 3 new constitutional amendments. Let me say that again. Our ancestors going through this Reconstruction period, or era as they call, right after the Civil War, right, from 1863 to 1877, supposedly is making our ancestors citizens with civil rights supposedly guaranteed by the three constitutional amendments. We know 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment, right? Okay? Now, these are the things that to this day, we have other organizations, other people who siphon off of what was given based on the fact that what our ancestors have fought, died, and bled are now to this day using this as a sword against us to actually push our head underwater while they're trying to elevate themselves. Let me say that again. Here it is. We're talking about 1863 to 1877, talking about the Reconstruction era. When we're talking about when they created the so-called three new constitutional amendments, 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment, that supposedly is making our ancestors citizens with civil rights, right? But we see in this day and age, in this 21st century and the 20th century, that many people have come, rolled off, trying to hold our head underwater to elevate themselves using what our ancestors will have paid and paved. And then people are always saying, when they talk about, you'll hear some newscasts come on and talk about, how fair is it if an immigrant come from another country who just got here? Why would they have to pay for slavery? Because this is the raft that you floated on, that you came for refuge. Otherwise, you had no other place to come. And the people who build it, don't you think you owe gratitude, some homage, allegiance to them? No, you feel like you don't, right? No, you don't. I don't. Why do we owe you anything, right? We don't owe you anything. So let me tell you something here about this Reconstruction. Because you got to know this. They tell you that Lincoln is freeing the slaves, right? But maybe I'll talk about that later. Maybe I'll talk about that later. Should I talk about that later? I think I need to talk about that later, because the question becomes, you need to know everything that took place. Because everybody act like they somehow think they know, but I don't think you really want to hear. You really don't really want to know. I think a lot of people really just don't want to know. But you know, when Lincoln got assassinated, the vice president came in, Andrew Johnson, right? Now, you know, he was a former slave owner, right? Huh? And what he did, coming into the game, to bring the South back into the Union, you know what he did? Now remember, Lincoln did all that, all those men who died in the Civil War, but it was Andrew Johnson who reparated. Why not say reparated? Well, you can't say he reparated. He did give them reparations because he gave them back their property. Except for, they say, was we. You know, he pardoned them because they went into Congress and they called it the Radical Republicans, right? And they voted on that those who fought against the Union were basically traitors to the nation, and that they should be ostracized and have no refuge here in this land. But it was Abraham Lincoln who pocket voted, meaning he did not sit and proceed. Congress had went into a recess and it just went non-void, and it was like nothing ever happened, even though the both Senate and the House had voted for it. But that was the end of it. So Lincoln came with some other kind of 10%. If most of them would have allegiance, then that would be suffice. Okay? So he gets assassinated, and this vice president comes in and basically reversed everything that Abraham Lincoln did. Did they ever teach you this? Did they ever teach you this? They're not going to teach you this, right? And so this is where now you're going to say you're getting the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment, right? Do you know that this Andrew Johnson allow those of the Southern Confederates, after losing the war, those who were left over and came back, They the ones who are writing up the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment. That's why it has that little funny little clause in it. You can go to jail. Slavery exists except for if you go to jail. Don't that just seem ironic? Why would you say that? What do you mean slavery exists? Why the fact that if you break law, you go to jail? But slavery, so why would that be in there? Because that is, you know how the creator puts something as a fingerprint? That's the fingerprint to let you know that what I just told you is true. That they allow the people that they had beat, killed them, took their property, made them go bankrupt, and now they say we're going to let you be the ones because now the people that we got that we supposed to be protecting, somehow we're going to let them come back down there, and you guys are going to work this out. They're going to work. You're going to pay for them, right? Like that's going to work out. Huh? Can you imagine that? That's like somebody, hypothetically speaking here, somebody had you hostage, doing all kind of unimaginable, heinous things to you. Right? Matter of fact, that story about her name was Barry. Remember the brother that was at McDonald's eating a cheeseburger, and she was in there, and I said, "Oh, this white girl, right?" And he went out there, and he got her to help her get out, right? Now just imagine, okay, she done got escaped, right? Instead of them taking him to jail, they say, "All right, we're just going to let her go." I think it was Amanda Berry, right? I think that's her name. Let her go, right? You get your property back. Now, Amanda, we're going to come to you. Now, the deal is you have to go back, and he's going to make sure he's not going to mistreat you this time. Okay? You're going back to the individual who had you hostage in the house that you had to yell out the window to get the man with the cheeseburger to come help you. Now I'm going to send you back there and hoping that things going to work out. Huh? That's how this works. That's how it went down for us. So anybody who got all this disdain and looking at black people, oh, you guys are lazy, you don't want anything, is because you don't know our real history. I don't think you really care. I think many of you come from places that have its own kind of caste system, color system, or racist system, and then you come here and do the same thing. Even though you may have shades of melanin, but somehow that psychology of yours is no different than being an honorary white person. Yeah, I said it. So anyway, so let me show you this, right? Let me show you this, right? Let me go ahead and let me tell you this, because a lot of people don't really know this, right? Because you heard me say that. So let me give you another part of the history. Let me go back to the 1862, because remember 1862 is the Freedman Act. But you got to understand what we as black Americans, what we were when they was giving out the Homestead Act to give the free land that they were giving out. Who were we and where were we? Okay? And a lot of people, whether you care to know or not know, it's okay. You know, because even when we're going through this, right, you have to ask yourself, where were you? And who was your people? And what was you going through? To come here and then act as if like you don't know, it is what it is, right? So, you know, the story goes as to the unions was trying to get, you know, it goes like this. I'm going to just tell like this. So we have three ancestors who they talk about. They talk about, I think one name was Shepard Mallory. You had Frank Barker. And you had James Townsend. And so, according to what the story had talked about, it's talking about how they were building Confederate fortifications near Hampton, Virginia homes. This is shortly before the outbreak of the Civil War. And so, it was learned that their owners, right, were planning to move them further south to labor for the Confederate armies. And it was going to separate them from their families. And so what you have is, all right, so you got our ancestors who just did what they did, okay? word was getting around that it was about the Union Army was saying that if any slaves could get to the grounds, to get to those grounds, and that they would be free and could be enlisted into the Union Army. Now, when the Union Army put that call out, they were only really suspecting that they would only get those who wanted to be in the military, not knowing that, again, being in the conditions that we were in, that we would flee at any chance that we would get, and not just by ourselves. We would take everybody who was connected with us, immediate families and so forth, and children and so on. So this would happen. Word was spreading all through, and this was happening. That's why they tell you the outstanding numbers that end up taking place. Now, what happened is all the flooding of our ancestors getting to these Union camp territories and seeing that there was men, women, children, those who were not actually able-bodied soldiers, was creating a scenario. So now they had people who, based on the word that got out to getting the freedom, they came. So the circumstance changed where it was like, okay, we got these people, but then in 1850 you had the Slave Act law, right? Where the Slave Act was the fact that you had to return property based on, because now there had been law. So when it comes to inquire about our ancestors, well, the Union had to say, well, we had to take this contraband for the simple fact that you were fighting against us. And so we're going to confiscate them. But to legitimize it, they had to enlist them into the Union Army. Now, why they enlisting them into the Union Army, they also got to be paid because they're now soldiers. So keep that in mind. So as all this, our ancestors are flooding into these territories now, you building these what they call contraband camps, right? You got the contraband camps happening. And then ironically, what's happening during this time with the contraband camps is a smallpox is starting to form. Like somehow, some way, like we have today when we're talking about we're going through with the coronavirus, the SARS-CoV-2. Well, that's just happened to seem to be happening during this particular time. So while people were dealing with the smallpox, yet still the Union Army was still kind of contemplating whether to do or let you go back. And so you had those who did enlist in the Union Army saying that, no, we're not going to let them go back because we already understand what's going to happen to them. So they were taking the stance. And so the Union Army had to enlist them too. Okay. So that's where they start building the camps and cleaning grounds and all that. But they were now property because they were now soldiers enlisted into the military. And so as these were, going into the southern territory to go fight and confiscating more land, so then we know that as time goes on, Lincoln wanted to already say the emancipation, but he wanted to wait till a first victory. They get the victory, makes the announcement. Now, when President Abraham Lincoln makes this announcement, we are put in a de facto stateless state. We have now, this is why you hear the term refugees and all this stuff, is because we were actually deemed stateless people with actually, because you remember, the Judge Taney situation made us not to be citizens. Could never be citizens. So here we are now, because you got to create now laws. And remember, this ain't happening during the time because Lincoln haven't established that. That don't get established until he's dead, and then now Stephen comes in. So once he gets in, this is how they create all this. Revoke what Lincoln had done. So I'm saying maybe somewhere in that revocation, when you say emancipation, and when you really think about what emancipation is, it's not a law. It was never by Congress. It was just an announcement. So what game has been played this whole time? right? That's what you guys say. What's this game that's been played this whole time, right? And so here we are with a new president who don't really like you, who was a slave owner, is now going to set you up to go back in the South. They're going to create black code laws. And when they create all this stuff, they're making contracts that you have to stay with this individual and you can't break the contract. And if you do, penalize and be in prison. And a whole lot of nonsense is being stipulated and put on us. Right? And so you got to think about this. This is what you got to think about. Remember I told you that we had got enlisted and we got money, right? Because we had been considered soldiers. Okay? So what I want to teach or tell you, right? So teach, I'm just going to tell. I'm not teaching anything. I'm just here to tell something that those who should know or not know. Have you ever heard of the Freedman Bureau banking? Have you ever heard of that? So remember, we were offered the 40 acres of mule that was ordered by Lincoln, but then when he gets killed, the vice president comes in, is going to non-void that, and then establish the 1866, which was the second Freedman Bureau, again, to get the Homestead Act. Then they reneged on that because, again, it was supposed to go from 1866 to 1868. They only did it for a year. And just like Joe Biden said in that video, as you heard originally when they created it, it says exclusively, specifically for black Americans, descendants of slaves. But then what they did is they changed it and created it so it would be with white people. Again, those who had now lost their property in the South. Because another thing too is a lot of the Union armies went down there, and supposedly what they write is they burned and scorched a lot of those lands to run them out of there. So you had a lot of barren land with no property, but still had the ground. So now when you're creating this 1866 and talking about establishing and giving black folks 80 acres. Now, let me tell you something. They said 40 was with, what was his name? Sherman. But the order number 15 was 40 acres. The 1866 Homestead Act was 80 acres. But what happened was they stipulated and put the white man in there. So the lands that some of our ancestors did get were the leftovers at the land that the white man did not want. And then they had a stipulations as to if you got those lands, you had a certain period of time that you had to get them lands operable, working, and if not, you couldn't own it. You could only rent, lease it, but you couldn't own it. But yet, that was what the whole Homestead Act was about. And then instead of it running 2 years, allowing for us to go ahead to take advantage of the situation, you only did it for a year. In 1 year, they cut it off. Okay? So a lot of you may never heard that. And you may say, well, what does that got to do with it? Well, we've been here as long as some people been here. You think we don't have property by now? Been here as long as we've been here. We're still talking about just getting property. But that's not the crux. That's just one part. All right? Here's another part for you. I just told you Freedman Bureau Bank. Now here it was, as I told you, about how our ancestors came from the South and came up and got into the Union armies. And because of the 1850 Slave Act, they had to be considered to be a part of the military, which now they had to be paid. Remember I said that, right? Take a break, come right back. All right, so that tells you the fact that our ancestors had some money. They had been in the military. There was money for being enlisted and all that. So here it was. It was called the Alvord Plan. ALVORD plan, right? It was called the Alvord Plan. And this Alvord Plan was to create so that our ancestors had somewhere to put the money that people were so concerned about. But this wasn't the first time, according to what they write in history, it wasn't the first attempt to try to get our ancestors, particularly they talk about the soldiers. Now, they want to say soldiers is because, how they talk about patriotism and everybody who gives acknowledgement and praise to the soldiers. This is why we were doing this, because they were actually patriotic to the nation. But the also fact is those who also fought in the military were also asked to go to Liberia as well, right? But then that's what Lincoln was contemplating. Well, how can I ask a man that done fought for his country and then try to send him to Liberia? But Lincoln also said something too that a lot of people probably never heard or have heard. He said that the black people probably never ever have refuge and safeness here in this country. Let me say that again. Abraham Lincoln said that the black people, those who had been emancipated, those who had been freed, would probably never have refuge and safety in this land. Was he right? So, here was interest came amongst those who were in the military. And sometimes somebody will have their best interest with you, but when you look at their history about what they've done with you, aren't you a little skeptical about why are you so interested in worrying about what I'm going to do with my money? But because being from this position we had been in this short period of time, now remember this, prior to 1865, and we take from 1619 to 1865, how much is that? About 200, what's that? 200 and about 36 years, right? 36 or 46 years. 246 years, right? And we're talking about how many generations. And so those who had came, again, many people keep thinking, just imagine that. Our ancestors had been 246 years. And when they heard the chance to get free, they were running. So that means our people have never, ever, ever really accepted the plight that was put on them. They were always looking for an opportunity to get out of it, right? And so, coming out of that, we're not talking about a generation later. We're talking about coming right out of the condition of being on plantations. Now going on to somebody else, becoming a soldier, and then I got some money. But then you got to also ask yourself, where are they going to spend their money at? You're still living in a country that just fought a civil war. According to now that the president who had established this is dead, the person who's coming in, filling in behind him is reestablishing, reinstating, and they're saying you have to live amongst them. You got to live amongst them. But you got a little money in your pocket. We can't say that the Confederates, did they get money and was their money no good after the system was over? So here it is. You got money. So they prevented you from actually taking advantage of the Homestead Act of 1866. And you got money. Y'all hear what I'm saying? So now you can see why there was so much turmoil to prevent our people from establishing, because you had a certain people who had just went through a civil war, who lost everything and lost all their money, and the money maker is now going to be in a position that we're going to be better than you. So somebody was having a grandiose idea. They were sitting down contemplating, probably at a bar, smoking, playing poker. They say, hey, man, at the door, they got an allotment system they got up there, right? What they did is they would take the payments and deduct it each month and send it to relatives. And then the military officials would hold the money until the soldier left the service. Now, that might be more trustworthy if you're white. But when you're black, right, that who holding the money, right, that who was the one who had to cut the check for you, were they not sitting there thinking, they about to give this Negro money, a lot of money. You know what this Negro can do with this money if they get together and start doing something? This could be a problem for us. Now, those who don't know how black Americans, how we've been here and what we've been going through and enduring. So what they said is they talked about there was commanders, and because of them saying they're being in their regiments and maybe having some kind of, relationship with some of the soldiers, they said, man, hey, what are you guys going to do with the money when you guys get out? What were they, They're sitting there thinking, what are you going to do with this money when you get out? What are you going to do with it? Oh. I think you guys need to take your money and put it somewhere. Are you seeing somebody here sitting here trying to devise some way to figure a way to take what you got? Now remember, again, they devised a plan after you done so-called got free after the Civil War. They set up the black code laws and Reconstruction there, and they got you in contracts. And these contracts that are set up are basically the government is owning these controlled federal government plantations. That even the ones who they beat are actually out there like overseers while you're working, and the whole thing is about for the government. But nobody want to talk about that. And so here it was. You got these contracts that force you actually to go back down there, right? Because I'm going to tell you how that happens. Keep that in mind. I'm going to tell you how you end up going back down there, okay? I'm going to show you how you got back down there. They say it, but nobody never tell you how you do it. So again, you got these military officials and people who are sitting here thinking, hey, man, I think you guys need to figure out a way to put your money up, right? I think this is a good way for you as black Americans. It's a good transition for you from slavery to, get yourself incorporated into this economical mainstream of American society. Oh, that sounds good, don't it? Let me say that again. So I sit down telling one of our ancestors, like, be good for you African Americans, make a good, a good transition, a successful transition. You guys came from slavery, now you're in freedom. So I think if you guys find a way to take your money, this would be a truly good way to incorporate you into the economic mainstream of American society. Find a way to put your money up. Oh, they were so generous and thought worthy of you, weren't they? Now, what happens is this. They said there was a New York group who voted on the plan called the John Alvord Plan. Now, who is this New York group they talking about? Who is these New York group of men who read about my ancestors and the money that they got sitting in the military, who just been emancipated? Who is the New York group that's going to vote on that they need to put a charter together, and that the federal government should secure this money that they about to do? I wonder who they were. So they said about in 1865 of February, there was a senator named Charles Sumner of Massachusetts. What he did is he a bill to incorporate the Freedman Savings and Trust Company. and they put it before Congress. Now, this act that they're putting together was to incorporate the Freedman Savings Bank and Trust Company. And guess who was the one that originated and signed that into existence? It was Abraham Lincoln, March 3rd of 1865. Huh? Now, I understand why people would say Lincoln emancipated and all the things that Lincoln was doing. Lincoln had good intent. But he did also say that for the Union, he would do anything. If he needed to keep Negroes enslaved to save the Union, he'd do it. He'd do whatever it took, right? If that meant freeing you, he'd do it. But if he needed to keep you slave, he'd do it. So he neither yay or nay. You don't know where he really coming or going, right? But okay, was what it was, right? So again, you got Lincoln signing what they say, right, is what? The Freedman Saving and Trust Company. Now remember, this coming all the way from New York. That they got these men coming in proposing this to him, and Lincoln signs it. Now 50 men in New York is sending their man John Albort to come over here to do this business, and Lincoln signs it. Now they said that the object and the purpose was to have a simple saving institution that they said was primarily, right? What do you mean primarily? Now see again, you know, when they say again, he don't speak straight. Primarily means not necessarily just for you. It has some other functions and maybe other people's. But the whole objective of us even thinking about putting this together is for the former slaves and their descendants, which means include us to this day. Because you said their descendants. But then think about the fact that they say primarily, meaning they got some other objectives somewhere swirling in this. Black folks got some money. You ever know when black folks got some money, people figure a way to put their business down there. Matter of fact, they don't even have to do that no more. They do it with commercials. You know, every time when that tax time comes, you gonna get that check. Now, old black folks who've been around remember this. Remember how on the TV come on all those furniture commercial, car commercial, all that stuff come on around the time they know you about to get that check. Because black folks get that money knowing they need and gonna spend, blow their whole check. Man, I know somebody one time got a $5,000 check and then spent that mug in one day at one stop at one place. I was like, damn, all of it? All of it. I was, my, what? But they, again, see, they know you. So here it was again. The objective was to make a simple saving institution, primarily for us, by us, but I ain't by us. It might be for us, but it wasn't by us. It's always been the mantra when you look at our history. Something that proposed and looked like it's for us, but somehow it ain't by us. And then in the end, it bites us in the ass. And then we be wondering why it didn't work. Now, let me tell you some of the things that they were supposed to do. All right. So now they were going to do is take the money that was deposited by our ancestors. Okay. Take our money. Now, they was going to take a portion of the money that they took from our ancestors. And, you know, we got operating costs and other emergencies, whatever that might be. We understand there might be some siphoning, somebody put money in their pocket. But they said that the monies that were used in this bank, now listen to this, were to be invested in stocks, bonds, treasury notes, and other securities of the United States. Let me say that again. Do you know that those deposits that were received by our ancestors, besides, operating costs and other emergencies, they're going to take our ancestors' money, which is our money too, invested in stock, bonds, treasury notes, and other securities of the United States. So that means We have invested into this country. We, from the beginning, from the very first time that we got some money in our hands, we took our money and invested in the United States. Did we not? We invested in this, huh? And that this particular so-called simple savings institution was not supposed to be loaning no money. And that all the assets of the bank was supposed to be owned by we, the depositors. But then they had a little clause in it talking about, the portions of the deposits of each that you put in. Now, wait a minute. Okay, you made the bank. The bank is made off our money, our deposits. So, but aren't you isn't that the banking, how the bank works, takes money, loan it to people? But because you said we're not going to loan any money, but yet you're going to invest our money, stock, bonds, and treasuries. So isn't that part of our who in deposit and them assets, is them not ours? Those weren't our money, right? That was not our money. Okay. That wasn't our money too, right? So they say that there was a board of 50 trustees. Wow. Do they all get paid? Were they all getting salaries? Huh? 50 board trustees. And they were all authorized to manage the bank. You need 50 board members to manage, authorize the bank where you only got is black money in there primarily, right? And so what you got is that Congress would appoint those who could go and inspect and examine what was going on at the bank. Now, wait a minute. Is this government operated? Or is this some individuals outside of it? What's going on here? So this bank or this simple institution as a bank seems to not be 100 the way that you're supposed to go with a bank. But all these other people who are participating in it, and then somehow it's got some kind of Congress sanction, but what about the securities of the bank? And so what happens is the bank that was only a part of the District of Columbia was the only bank that had made no provisions. Okay? It was only that one. And so the whole plan, this Albert plan, was to open bank branches wherever there was a large Black American descendant of slave community, especially in the South. Let me say that again. Here it is, creating this bank that originates now in New York. Remember, in New York, that's where it originated from, where they sent their man, John Albert, in here to come talk to Lincoln. Hey, you know what? But this cat ain't nothing. He ain't even a banker. Why are you allowing him to set up some stuff to be able to take our money, and then we're going to invest it in this thing here? And now they had the grandiose idea, well, we're going to put it, wherever there's a large number of black people at, we're going to put the banks there. So about 1866, the headquarters from New York moved to Washington, D.C. in 1867. Want to get a little closer. We got to get into Washington, right? And so now, about 1874, there was some kind of amendment that they talked about in about 1870, where it had to amend its charters, which changed the loan and investment policy. Somehow, they went in, and their origins of what the bank was doing from the beginning, when they talked about stock, investments, and all that, somebody went back in there, we got to change that up. 1870, the charter is going to change the loan investment policy. Then there came a bank panic in 1873. So wait a minute. Who was the individuals that was in New York that came up with the whole grandiose idea to figure out to set up a damn bank for our ancestors to put their money in? And then when they put all their money in, right, then according to the original charter, they said they can't loan on the money, but they can invest in stock bonds and all stuff that things that are part of the United States. And then in 1870, now you're going to change up the way to say, no, we're going to change this loans and investment policies. And then in 73, you got a panic happening. You know what happening? Because now they had problems, what they said was overexpansion, mismanagement and abuse, and outright fraud. Let me say that again. 1873, a panic happens. They talking about problems of overexpansion, mismanagement, abuse, outright fraud, and the whole bank is going on collapse. What? Okay, so here it was. The overexpansion, mismanagement, abuse, and outright fraud made the bank go into what? Collapse mode. So you know what's happening. We said today. Think about it. Somebody starts saying, hey man, I heard word is bank's about to close. Right? Well, in this day and age, I guess if you got it on credit, but if you got cash and every other thing, you going in there to try to do a bank run. We've been taking all that shit up out of there, right? So guess what happened? Word got out, and guess what was happening? Black folks running to the bank to try to get their savings out of there. They start going to all the banks, start getting their money up out of there. So once again, now I say this not to be disrespectful to the ancestors or say that whether he was in cahoots or not, but the story is this. That here it is that the bank panic is happening. Black folks is running trying to get up all their monies and they saving because they try not to lose all their money because they understood if this happens, what's going to happen to them. So you know what they did? They went and got the Negro Whisperer. You know, they always do that, right? Al Sharpton, Jesse Jackson, you know, many more they'll go get, right? They come out there to try to quell down. All right, calm down. All right, I'm going to jail for everybody. Okay, everybody go back after you get angry. So you know what they did? They went and got Frederick Douglass to be elected as the bank official. Let me say that again. Do you not know when they started to do that bank run of 1874 and the people, our ancestors, started losing confidence in this bank and started hearing the word that the word was going to collapse? They went and got Frederick Douglass to try to get him to show trust that because now this is what he does. Frederick Douglass, according to what they say that he didn't even know. He was unaware. He didn't know nothing about the bank books. He didn't know about all the inner workings of the bank. You know what Frederick Douglass did? To show the confidence of the people, to show them that the bank is safe, they let Frederick Douglass invest $10,000 of his own money to demonstrate the faith in the future of the bank. Let me say that again. Do you not know that they went knowing what was happening with the bank? Now, see, this is the thing. They knew what was happening with the bank. But to save face, to try to somehow, this sinking ship that's going down, we're going to get the Negro Whisperer that we got in our pocket to use him to try to quell down the Negroes, because if they do, they're going to get angry. So what they did is they got Frederick Douglass, elected him as the bank official. He invests $10,000 of his own money. $10,000? Damn, Frederick Douglass had a lot of money. He had $10,000 to invest. At that time, 1870, huh? Who's Frederick Douglass? Anyway, so he put in $10,000 of his own money, right? And guess what happened? You know what Frederick Douglass is quoted saying? He went in there, right, assessing the condition of the company. And he said he realized he married to a corpse. This bank was dead. And he went and he recommended Congress that the bank be closed. But no, that ain't true. Truth of the matter is, once they elected him, and he put that $10,000 in there, before he could get in there and look at them records and find out what was going on, the bank was closed. Huh? So you know what they did? They went through the formality. They try to act like they trying to do what they supposed to be doing. So Congress did an act of June 20th, 1874, and they authorized the trustees. What was that, 50 of them? They got the trustees. They got the approval of the Secretary of Treasury. Then they went and appointed 3 more board members to take charge of the assets of the company. What assets of the company? Are you talking about them stock, bonds, and all those other things, treasuries, the things that they was invested in the United States? So what did they come in there and do? Huh? Did they come in there and change it up that somebody else is now? You understand what I'm saying? And so they went in there, the reports of his financial condition to the Secretary of Treasury. And then less than a week after the act had passed it, the bank was closed. The bank was closed. Ain't that something? I bet they got qualified immunity too, didn't they? They got sovereignty immunity too, didn't they? Everybody gets immunity when you messing over black Americans. Oh, we can see that this had to be an inside job, because why was you you was worried about, black, where you going? What they were going to spend their money when they couldn't go nowhere to spend their money? Why were you so worried about what they were going to do with their money if they was going to be frivolous and blow it? That would be like, Dave Chappelle. I just think that Dave Chappelle owed black people apology. Not because I hate Dave Chappelle. I like Dave Chappelle. I just think, I don't know whether he wrote that script or not, but whoever wrote that script when they had to make it, when the black people get reparations, you know what I'm saying? We're going to be out here buying trucks of cigarettes and all that. You know what I'm saying? You ask yourself that. When the people ain't got nothing and they finally get something, the first thing you're going to do is get all the things you need. So why everybody trying to make it like this? Oh, black people just going to buy Nikes and Jordans. Well, shit, I got feet. I need shoes, right? If I buy jersey, I need shirts. Now, again, I got champagne taste, but now I got some champagne money. What is it to you how I spend my money? So I think it's an apology, because everybody trying to act like when they got, now the thing is, you got money, that had money for such a long time, but I bet your ancestors who first got some damn money, I bet they were doing the same damn thing. Matter of fact, what you think them damn plantations was all big, lavish and big and decked out? What you thought? What do you think they were doing the same thing? You got some money, look at you got all this stuff in there, but ain't nobody tripping about none of that. Ain't nobody tripping about none of that though. No, it's okay. It's you guys. So took this Dave Chappelle thing and y'all done ran with it. So now everybody say, every time somebody black tell them, black people, when they get some money, gonna do them but blow it. Well, ain't that what money for? Spending, buying, right? Now again, it's up to you, the individual, if they want to be frugal with their money or they want to go ahead and be, exploitive with it. It's up to them. That's their business. Everybody always worrying about the business of what black Americans are doing. And every time y'all in our business, it never fares well with us. History has been the indicator to show that every time y'all been dealing, y'all been always keeping our ass at some internal trick. And then what happens? We holding the bag with nothing in it. Can you believe that? So in 1881, Congress abolished the board of the 3 commissioners. So they got to have a scapegoat now. You guys that went in there, you didn't do what you're supposed to do, so we're going to abolish the board and then authorize the treasury to appoint controllers of the currency to oversee the affairs of the bank. What good is it? The bank already gone. The money, everything gone. Bust, pow. But we got to keep playing the game. Huh? We got to keep playing the game. And why they played the game in their restructuring, rewriting and everything? Because you got to ask yourself, what were the true assets? Has anybody ever seen the real documents of what really went in? And we know it all got changed, especially about all this time. But what really happened? What kind of stocks and bonds and stuff did we help? Matter of fact, I ain't gonna say help. Did we buy the railroad companies and those stuff that they were building? Was it our money? Was it our money? You know, it's kind of like saying the government, talking about the money that's in the government. That's our money because you got the free labor off of us, right? And then when we finally got some money, because they said that we had over 70,000 in some readings, 100,000 in other depositors. We talking about 70, 100,000, more than that. But we had $57 million at that time. 1860 before 1874, we had $57 million and we can only live amongst ourselves. When we talk about today, black community, building our own, all that stuff, we had the money, but somebody said, oh no, you better not let them build that shit. You better, there will be nothing. They already got the agrarian skills, carpenters, they had all the skills, and then now you're going to give them money? And then y'all sit in our face and talking about how we don't have nothing and we're just looking. But you won't acknowledge what has been done to us. So here it is. You done closed the Freedman Bank. But you got our name on it. The Freedman Bank is a black bank. Well, the blank bank closed. It collapsed because black people didn't know how to manage, control their money, and all, right? So here was the closure of the Freedman Bank. And it devastated our people. Devastated us. Can you imagine that? He just got out of slavery. Just what is that? Okay. We answered not in 10 years, less than 10 years from being free from slavery. You got a chance to probably put all your money in, And when you do the math, right? If you do the math, or to say 57 million and you take the 70,000 or 100,000, let's say the average person had at least 800 and let's say $840. Like $840 at that time. An acre of land was only $1.25. You understand what I'm saying? We had money. But somebody said, let's figure a way to take this money from them. So you devastated our communities. So they want to say, oh, it was a well-meaning experiment in philanthropy. Experiment? You experimenting? Y'all couldn't fulfill to make sure because of you. Again, they want to tell us, oh, abolitionists and radical Republicans and Lincoln was against that. But you experimented. That's something that, oh, when it comes to y'all, is there experiment? Was there any banks busting and folding when y'all was running banks? Has there any been since? We ain't talking about when Obama came in and the $777 billion that he gave. We ain't talking about that. We ain't talking about back then. No. So it was an experiment. So it was well-meaning. Here it was the nightmares that was our ancestors was going through. Trusting. And then you wonder why we don't trust nothing. Like the other day I did a video that they made me take the video down. Right? Because I was talking about how, that governor Lamont had told the preachers that he needed to get black people to go out there and get themselves tested, right? And then that's just the church. Then you got the medical, right? About the Tuskegee. Then you got what the government did. Then you got what the bank did. Then you can see why black folks don't have no trust in you. Every time they trusting you, you keep showing who you are every single time. It never fails. So guess what happens? You show who you are, we're going to believe who you are. Right? Yeah, that's what you're talking about. Oh, no, it's just this. You guys, you got to trust us. We're not really like that. You're not really like what? What you really not like? Huh? What you really not like? See, the difference between those who have been here versus those who just got here, we've been in the game so long. You know, parent to child. You can have children who think they slick, right? You got some, everybody know, you got some children, they think they real slick. They think they saying some stuff that you don't know. You just looking at them and they try to sell it to you. Like, well, now those parents who have their favorite, they let the child go through it and tickle inside and let them get away with it. Some of them, now your parent and you ain't got that good report, boy, you better get out here talking that nonsense to me, right? Right? You know when a kid lying, when you know them. Now, when they get a little older, a little bit more sophisticated in it, and they got good rapport and they kind of your favorite, they sell it to you. You buy it until you find out, you got me again. And then when they know, you know, and they still sell you even more. Even though like, you know, last time I did that, you did that to me. Well, oh, mama, oh, the dad. You understand? But that's what y'all do with us. Yet your history keeps showing every time, over and over again, you keep doing the same old thing, and you think that what they say, you keep doing the same old thing, you're going to get retardedness, right? So that's how y'all look at us, like, oh, you can sell them anything. Come on, go out there with some Timberlands on. Come on, y'all guys, let's put the kente cloth on. Huh? I'll just say, yeah, I'll sign the HR 40 bill, right? All that stuff is that's how y'all look at us. That's how they look at us. Oh, you just say any old thing is good. But you don't realize the telltale signs is on y'all. It's you that don't got no good rapport. It is you that record ain't no good with us. And then yet y'all try to reverse it because you begin feeling so guilty about what you do and get mad because we won't capitulate to your nonsense. Why should somebody capitulate to be scammed and schemed on? Wait, really? You know what I really come to think, y'all? I think they don't really know us. I think they think the stuff that they created and then writing scripts and say, we need you to do this. We need you to say this. We need you to dance like this. Right? Because you are the puppeteer and making certain people that you get and pay on your payroll and have them do every kind of thing that you don't come to believe that is what they depict because you think that. But in actuality, you really don't know us. Do I need to say that again? No, I don't think I need to say that again. I think it was said for what it is, right? So here it is, you devastated our ancestors, huh? And wonder why we don't have no trust. And so here it was. Our ancestors was like, okay, so the bank bust. All right, so that's what it did. It bust, so what? What about the assets? What about the assets? What about all the stocks and stuff that we bought? The country didn't bust. So why are we losing our money? Huh? Think about that. That's what they were saying. Okay, the bank bust. What about our assets? Did they bust? Did they bust? Or was they just stolen when they talk about defraud and all that? And so guess what? The way they set this whole thing up, they didn't have no protection. Just like when you think about when they did after Civil War, sent us back in the South talking about we were supposed to acquire this land, 40 acres in the mule. Then Lincoln dies. You pull away the protection, leave us back in hostile areas like back in the days. Now, I don't know if you're from where I'm from. Back in the days, now again, police may hear me. Again, the shoe only fits us when you do this kind of shit, right? It ain't for everybody. But then, sometimes they used to take you and put you in a hostile white area and let you out and talk about get back home. Let me say that again. Sometimes police would take you, drive you to an area that's a hostile to where you being black and they being white, or could be a Hispanic area as well, and drop you off and say, fend for yourself. Huh? Well, that's what they did with our ancestors. Right? That's what they did with our ancestors. Huh? Put you back in a hostile area and drop you off and then have no kind of government protection. Well, you did the same thing when it came to the damn banks too. The same damn thing. It did the same thing. Right? So here it is. I asked and said, hey man, what about the deposits? What about them stocks and bonds and all that stuff? We put all our money in there. Huh? So what you did, the brighter future that whatever was being planned got bust. So you know that did left a bad feeling in our mouths, right? Once again being betrayed, abandoned. So people like to say, well, at this time we're only going to distrust in the American bank. No, it was you in particular. Nothing you say has ever been substantiated by a truth. It's part truth, a truth. Never whole truth, not 100%. Your word has never been good. And so what happened? Do you know that our ancestors, they went and they petitioned Congress to reimburse for our losses? 30 years they were sitting there trying to get their money back. 30 years. Can you believe that? So when you think about, was it the banking system that did that to us? Did the act made it possible for them to slip through Congress and pay little attention to the economic realities that was going to befall us? Or did somebody have, you say 50 men, but there might have been more than that. You said $57 million. So besides, let's say, Oklahoma, what are the places that we build on black money at that particular time? So here it was, rolling, playing high. Here it was, y'all playing, rolling the dice with people who had nothing or little knowledge about banking business. Now, the people who actually are setting this up, but the people who they tied to, they won't disclose who they are. And so here it was. Congress expanded the sorts of investments it was permitted without regards to the risk environments. And the whole thing collapsed with great cost to who? We've been taking the blunt of all and everything that is wrong. And then people say, we unpatriotic, we un-American. There is no more, if anything of the word American, if it's not about being black American, there is no America. That stuff that y'all talk about is just, you're just the face, but the trueness of what the guts and the spirit and embodiment of this country, we are it. We are it. We are it. So here it was. This chaos gonna pursue. Who gonna feel it more? You know, every time when what they say, white folks catch cold, black people catch pneumonia. So here was all this chaos because now you got this collapsing in the bank and all this other stuff and the panic of 1873, I think it was. And so here we are, newly freed, had some money, and everything gone. Everything. Now we got no property. A lot of us we ain't trying to go work down in the old systems of gang labor. We ain't trying to do that. Regardless of how much money you was trying to give us, or what you promised to pay us, Here it is. Landowners lost everything. The liquid assets wiped out. Lack of cash. and to be paid by some of those who went back and took them contracts. So what ended up happening developing, y'all? This is how when you go back and now you search, when you searching through your records and you see that sharecropper, that's where that sharecropper is coming from. When you go back, trace your lineage, and you start seeing in them documents, start seeing sharecropper, a farmer, well, that's where it started from. Forced to go back because everything collapsed to put you back in there. So was it a devised plan to do that to us? Or we just want to say that white folks all of a sudden now had amnesia to how things work and then it collapsed and busts? Is that what they want us to believe? And so you even got some of them going back into the military, right? Just crazy, man. It's really, really crazy. So I want to tell you one other thing too, right? There's another situation that came up out of this. And it's kind of show you how history repeats itself. Let me see if I can. All right, so let me tell y'all this. All right, so let me tell y'all this here. So it said that they wanted to try to pursue pensions for our ancestors. And what they were trying to make a correlation is kind of like similar to those pensions that was used by the Union veterans. And so if a disabled elderly veteran were compensated for their years of service during the World War or the Civil War, they believe why shouldn't former slaves who had served the country in the process of the nation building be compensated for their years of forced unpaid labor? Okay? Think about that. You had our ancestors in the sense that you say that you paying those who were considered elderly who had fought for the country and to be compensated as a veteran. Why, if you, the winner of the Civil War, the now owner of the Air Territories, well, since we have not been in the Army long enough for us to even probably draw disability or, let's say, pension, why can't, let's say, for what we established through slavery, we be compensated for that? So this here would probably be the beginning of what? Reparations. Now you want to hear this story. But there would have been a relative modest number of people to compensate. If they would have did it, they said it would have been too many people, right? But you're doing it anyway, right? So what had happened is a movement pursued to grant pensions to our ex-ancestors, but that was facing a lot of strong opposition. People were not happy. Just like now, talk about reparations, and people were angry and don't want to hear that. But the strongest opposition came from who? Not even from the Southerners in Congress. But you know where it came from? The 3 executive branch agencies. Ain't that something? The judicial, executive, right? Executive, judicial, and what's the other branch? You tell me since you know, right? I know you know. And so they say, accordingly, the federal government, which was primarily at this time now, is going to be Republicans. And they're talking about how when they to allocate lands and all that stuff, and they go back and they talk about how everything that Lincoln had established got rolled back by Andrew Johnson through the Amnesty Proclamation of May 29th, 1865. Okay? And so here it was that our ancestors who got the lands, remember they gave the Freedman Act, and so now they evicted them from the lands distributed through the field order number 15 that Lincoln had got, right? So they had took advantage of those who took it. They had to get their lands taken from them, right? So what you got is Walter R. Vaughn of Omaha. He was an ex-mayor of the Council Bluff of Iowa. And he did not believe that or a subsequent bill should be identified as a pension bill, but instead as a Southern tax relief bill. Now, here it was, they were talking about creating a pension for ex-slaves. But he said this Walter Vaughn, he recognized that the pension would financially benefit former slaves and would indeed be a semblance of justice for their years of forced labor. Now again, let me say this one more again. Walter R. Vaughn, an ex-mayor council of Bluff, Iowa, did not believe or a subsequent bill should be identified as a pension bill. See, don't say pension. Like today, don't say reparations. Call it something else. Instead, say Southern Tax Relief Bill. Huh? See? Because why? Nobody wants you to be compensated, yet they get the benefits of what your labor produced, but don't ever be compensated about anything that has ever happened. We don't want to admit that. I'll take a break and be right back. Right, so once again, Southern Tax Relief Bill. And so that Walter R. Vaughn recognized that pension would financially benefit former slaves and would indeed be a semblance of justice for their years of forced labor. And the fact that the outcome would be that would involve ex-slaves spending their pension in the South in order to give the devastated Southern economy a financial boost. Now listen to that. That they would take the money that you're going to give as a Southern tax relief bill, give it to former slaves based on as paying them for their service of work, and that because of what done happened after the Civil War that devastated the economy, there was no economy, that now you got them, but then you also got the settlement of those that you done let back in there. So now black people got money and they ain't got money. You see how this is breeding, right? This is how this is breeding that Mellicott cocktail. The problem is you took and devastated and took all their money, and then you're going to put us down there to antagonize them and doing that. Do I really got a problem with it? No. The point is, and the fact that they couldn't protect themselves. There was no gun laws, none of that stuff. They couldn't protect themselves. So you got an angry white cat, mad because he done lost everything, and then you is got everything. What you think gonna happen, y'all? So they wanted to do that to bring and boost the Southern economy. But they said, And so what happened is The push for the ex-slave pension gained momentum in the 1890s. History repeating itself. So you had the grassroots movements composed largely of former slaves. ADOS, BADOS, FBA, B1, family members, friends. They say history repeats itself, right? So what you had is you had a number of, they say, ex-slave pension organizations start to formulate. National Ex-Slave Pension Club Association of the United States. You had the Ex-Slave Petitioners Assembly, the Great National Ex-Slave Union, the Ex-Slave Pension Association, the Ex-Slave Department Industrial Association of America, the National Ex-Slave Mutual Relief Bounty and Pension Association of the United States of America. BADOS, ADOS, FBA, B1, others, and so on. History repeating itself. Now, the MRB and PA was chartered on August 7th, 1897. They got a charter, right? Right? They got a charter, right? Now, again, who was that one, right? Wait a minute, who was that? Who was that you just said that was, right? That was the Mutual Relief Bounty and Pension Association of the United States. Okay? That's who that was. Okay? They got chartered. They had a dual mission, according to what they say. Their job was to petition Congress for the passage of legislation that would grant compensation to ex-slaves. Let me say that again. The MRBA and PA, which is what? The National Ex-Slave, what they took that part off, Mutual Relief Bounty and Pension Association of the United States of America. Okay? They took the National Ex-Slave off. They just made it Mutual Relief Bounty and Pension Association of the United States. Right? They got a charter on August 7th, 1897. They was to petition Congress for the passage of legislation that would grant compensation to ex-slaves. Particularly, they said, the elderly ex-slave, to provide mutual aid and burial expenses. And so this charter, what they did is they started to collect membership fees in order to help defray lobbying costs. Okay, so this organization and its members, what they did is they start charging or having a fee for those who are part of the membership. Okay, and they were monthly dues, and okay, and so what they was doing, they was taking this money that they were getting amongst the constituents, and they was going to go ahead and distribute this money throughout to the ancestors that fit. And so, late of 1890, this premier ex-slave pension organization had membership in the hundreds of thousands. Okay? Hundreds of thousands of our ancestors had joined MRB and PNA and this membership. Again, like today, ADOS, BADOS, and all those other groups that are out here, right? And so they had chapters mostly in the South, Midwest. They start having enrollment fees, dues, right? They start creating a whole organization, right? And so the organization, what they were doing was supporting to propose pension payments upon the age of beneficiaries that appeared in every ex-slave bill from 1899 onward. Now, what they said is, according to if an ex-slave was 70 years and older at the time of the disbursement, they were to receive an initial payment of $500 and $15 a month for the rest of their lives. Then it was those who between the ages of 60 and 69 years of age would receive $312 a month. Those who were age 50 to 59 would receive $100 and $8 a month. Those who were 50 would receive a $4 a month pension, right? And if you had somebody who was of our ancestors who was too old and was still ill and couldn't take care of themselves, you would provide the pension to the caretaker. Okay? Okay? I want you to keep this in mind. And so once one of our ancestors was considered a free person, once they reached a certain age threshold, then they would be eligible for even a higher pension. Okay? Now look at this. This is what we're creating. Now, again, everybody be talking about black business and self-sufficient and all this and trying to do for self and build for your own. History has always been an indicator when you do this. Now, listen how this is going to go down. And so again, what they want to do is make this kind of the same way when you look at the, again, ex-slave pensions was based on similar to the Civil War pension and how they gave their soldiers with disabilities, right? So this is what they was copying, right? They was copying, mimicking that, right? And what's wrong with that? Again, ask yourself, what is wrong with that? Okay? And so the headquarters of this was in Nashville, Tennessee. Now they had two of the most notable leaders of it one was called Isaiah H. Dickerson, and the other was a woman named Callie D. House. Let me say that again. The headquarters for this was in Nashville, Tennessee. Two of the most notable leaders was Isaiah Dickerson and Callie D. House. Dickerson was an educator and minister, general manager and national promoter of the organization. House was a widow, a laundress, mother of 5, and a former slave. Okay? She got elected as to be the assistant secretary of the association in November 1898. Became the national promoter of the movement alongside with Dickerson, right? And so this association grew, membership had grew, right? And as that membership got big, guess what happened? Government surveillance intensified. So Dickerson and House and other association officers were not aware that the federal government started to have this intense interest in their organization. Why was that? Why was they feeling like this was a threat that black people were being able to take care of themselves and why is that a problem? So they say, according to how they write, they say that they took the plans to undermine the larger movement. Right? Went into crafty counsel. And so they said that the 3 federal agencies, the Bureau of Pensions, the Post Office, and the Department of Justice worked in cahoots in the 1890s to investigate individuals and groups in the movement. Let me say that again. The 3 federal agencies, the Bureau of Pensions, the Post Office Department, and the Department of Justice work collectively to investigate individuals and groups in the movement. And so they said officials who pursued the investigation through the ideal of pension ex-slave were unrealistic because the government had no intentions of compensating former slaves for their years of involuntary labor. Let me say that again. The officials who pursued the investigators, those who came from the Bureau of Pensions, the Post Office Department, Department of Justice, said that they were pursuing the investigation about the ideas of pensioning ex-slave. They said it was unrealistic because the government had no intentions of compensating former slaves for their years of involuntary labor. Attorney General for the Post Office Department, admitted in 1899, there has never been the remotest prospect that the bill would become a law. Now, what bill is he talking about? Remember when they proposed the bill? When they said to change the name instead of it being that to the tax relief, Southern Tax Relief Bill? You've seen it on your screen, but you can't find it today, S1176, because they said it never existed. Yeah, you might have known because you were close at the time. They're never going to admit that. Or never was going to admit it. And so because they were getting together to get themselves so that they can use legislative and use the system to fight against it, they said this is what they did. Now see, some people will say it's the government doing it. The government don't run by itself. Somebody in there. So we took the DNA of the history of the government. What will Maury Povich come out and say who the father is? So what happened is in about 1902, they said a letter to the commander-in-chief of the Grand Army of the Republic said that they blame the slave pension or ex-slave pension organization for arousing false hopes for reparations. Let me say that again. History repeating itself. 1902 February, said the commander-in-chief of the Grand Army of the Republic, said the commissioners of the pension, they blamed the ex-slave pension organization for arousing false hope for reparation for historical wrongs to be followed by inevitable disappointment and probably distrust of the dominant race and of the government. What? So they build an organization that you said 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment, and then when they try to make a political apparatus to use to try to compensate themselves for the wrong that was done, the institution in itself turned against it and said that you're breeding false hope. And then you're going to make a mistrust about us and the government. Really? Really? So what they did is got special examiners of the law division of the Bureau of Pension attended Slave Pension Association meetings. So they start infiltrating the meetings, y'all. Start taking depositions from the officers, sent letters to officers and members to determine if officers will represent themselves as officials appointed by the United States government. They were trying to see what they saying they from the government. And so you got the Bureau of Pensions. So you got the three, you got Post Office, Bureau of Pensions, right? And you got, right? They all coming, sending in their agents. Ain't that something? But everybody keep telling us something wrong with us when they tell you law and order and that it's about justice, but that ain't the truth. And then here we is in 2020, and we can go back in history about 130 years later. It was the same business, and we can go in between 130 and today and in between, and what will be the modus operandi? What would it be? And so you see that they were saying that while any class of citizen, now this is what they will come out and say. Now they're going to come with the politically correct and say, while any class of citizen has an unquestioned right to associate for the purpose of attempting to secure legislation believed to be advantageous, these words are often simply a formality. What? Listen to what they said. This was the Bureau of Pensions telling to our ancestors who were sitting there trying to collectivize, again, creating an organization that through their proceeds were setting up, you know what I'm saying, pensions, and then yet at the same time were pursuing legislative to get for compensation for reparations. And here they is now saying that yes, you have the right as a class of citizens The right to associate for the purpose of attempting to secure legislation that you believe that would be advantageous to you. But these words were often simply a formality. They're not really about you. Huh? This is 1890. Huh? But I thought they said what Judge Taney wasn't true. I thought when Judge Taney had said the words that he said, that they said no, that he was wrong in that. Here they was here. Yes, you got the right. You can do this, but those words don't really mean what they say. They're just a formality. So here was this Bureau of Pensions. The inspectors, they would try to find some evidence to incriminate any of the influential MRB and PA officers who were suspected of fraud. So they were trying to use fraud. Haven't we seen that pattern before? Didn't they do that to Marcus Garvey too? So then you had the post office come. They took action. And they said that the mail that were being used to defraud the ex-slave. Huh? The mail is being defrauded. How? So here was the post office used the extensive anti-fraud powers, issuing fraud orders to organizations and offices. The movement was doing that. That's what they were claiming. Huh? Huh? So, in I think it was 1899, they issued one of the officers a fraud order against MRB and PA. They did one against Dickerson, Reverend D&D McNary, Reverend N. Smith, Reverend H.R. and House. Now again, there's a pattern here. People in position are reverends. Okay? And then what they did is they told them they were forbidding them to deliver any mail matters and the payments of money orders. So they were trying to prevent them from distributing the money that they got from their organization, that they created their own pensions based on their membership that people was willing to participate and do and to facilitate it to the X, and they wanted to shut that down. And so what the mail would do would intercept the mail, return it back to the sender as fraudulent, or they just simply withheld it. Here it was. They had fraud orders, obstruction of mail proceeds, even though the post office had no concrete evidence the associate had acted illegally. But they did it anyway. Did it because they could. But everybody sits and look at black Americans like, you really know us. You don't know us. You have no idea what we've been through in this country. You look at us today and you think you got the game down pat. Man, this game been going on a long time with us. This ain't brand new to this. And so we see that Dickerson and House and them, those again, the two representatives we know of, they sent a letter, right, to these officers to invoke their First Amendment rights. Right to assemble, the right to petition the government, according to the 14th and 15th Amendment, citizen rights, voting rights, based on the fact of the dire conditions of old ex-slaves. And so what happens? They kept denying the accusation that the movement was fraudulent or lottery. They went and got themselves an attorney to represent them. They tried to get the fraud order revoked, but because of, again, the position of those in the position, it was futile. They couldn't get that done. So the Post Office Department was determined to maintain the fraud order set in motion in 1899. And so the founding officers will continue searching for ways to limit their influences. So you got the Department of Justice gathered information, probed the activities of the officers, especially House, which is the sister, and was not to counteract any fraudulent belief. And so here they went in there and put a whole list of all the agents who they had, participants and officers, and showed that it was not a sham organization. But guess what the government did? Disregarded their proof. They don't care what you say. We said so, and that's what it is. That's what it is. We don't care what you say. So what happened? Got disbanded. But there was some also internal things that people come inside as sheep in wolf clothing, pretending to be who they were to help to undermine it is the question. Did that happen? Did that happen? And so here we are today in 2020 with the same issue. But no one wants to talk to us. No one wants to have the conversation about it. Just want it to just go away. And so if you keep being persistent, they're trying to find a way, aren't they, huh? Well, that's a little story I wanted to tell y'all today. Give you a little bit of that history. Again, give me your comments. Tell me what you like, dislike, understand. Give me your part. Whatever it is you got to share. We will kindly appreciate it. Take a break and be right back. All right, I want to thank each and every one of you for clicking on the video. I thank each and every one of you kindly, those who stayed to the end. Much love to you. Hopefully that some of the things that have been said you have heard or have not heard and learned something here. Again, impart your input, comment, subscribe. I have another channel called Black Minds TV. That's BLAKMINDZ TV. Help me to get to 1,000 subscribers, so that way, that's your way of helping me to, again, I'm the most hated show in the black corner of YouTube. That been in the business since 2012, but I used to be in the program and somebody inside decided to pull me out. But because you can't, those who know about YouTube, when you're not in the program, so how do you go to try to get a situation resolved? They make you go through the rigmarole that you can't. But if I was, now anybody should hear me and be a part of it and willing to come and try to help me, send me a comment or notice. So again, want to thank you. Until my next show, y'all, you know how we do it over here. Until the next show.